Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of World Cup Group Talk, where today we're focused on Group E. As you may be very well aware of the series, I'm going to be joined by a guest in each episode to focus on one of the nations in the group. And today I'm joined by André to take a closer look at the US women's national team. André is a very knowledgeable podcaster and writer covering all things Chelsea from the WSL, NWSL, and taking a closer look at the Washington Spirit by providing some really good analysis and an overall diverse conversation about the NWSL and the players involved. I'll be leaving all links to André's podcast in the description, but without further ado, let's jump into it and start talking about the reigning World Cup champions, the US women's national team. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by André to talk about the reigning champions themselves, the United States Women's National Team. André, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. This should be fun.
This should be fun because any talk about the reigning champions is going to be a fun one.
Yes.
A lot of expectations, a lot of looming clouds around the roster, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Speaking of the roster, we just got the 23-player squad announcement in some U.S. Women's National Team fashion. I mean, you cannot top how they announced the roster. But looking at it, there's kind of like this generational shift, you could say. You've got 14 players making their first ever senior World Cup appearance. You've also got some of the big veterans in there going into their fourth World Cup. I mean, did you see any surprises, any names that you thought were going to make it, they didn't make it? How do you assess the balance between the veterans and kind of the young stars that are to take over for the next upcoming World Cups here?
Yeah, so the balance of it is really an interesting conversation because, yes, there are a lot of familiar names. There are a lot of new names on the stage, but there's also names that have been around for a while, but this is going to be their first World Cup, like Lynn Williams. So her first World Cup is going to be Alyssa Thompson, who's 18 years old, her first World Cup too. So yes, she's a veteran, but she also has never been here. She did play at the Olympics in 2021, but, so you do have some interesting dynamics in that sense. But, we were talking before we recorded and it was just there were a couple surprises, I'll say. Kingsbury getting in at goalkeeper, that was fun to see. She's definitely earned it over the past. Ignore the Thorn Spirit game that we saw, but
Yep.
But she's definitely earned it over the past couple years. Savannah DeMello, somebody that I've been pretty vocal about. The talent just warrants call-ups, and this is kind of a whirlwind situation to have her in. But we were just kind of like, it's a predicted lineup, and perhaps it's because expectations have been lowered over the course of Valtko's tenure. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, apart from a couple, what I expected.
Could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse.
Could have been worse, could have been better, but we're rolling with it.
But if we were to take a closer look at some of these names that have made it in there, looking at the midfield, over, I want to say, a comfortable last year, there has been some concerns, midfield flaws that have consistently shown up, and it looks like we see it game after game, but it hasn't been fixed. Is there kind of still a looming cloud around that, and what do you think is going to fix it? And I think I'd propose a question here: is Julie Ertz coming back in going to be key to fixing that?
So
I know that was loaded.
Yeah, no, but I take a deep breath because it's one of the topics that I talk about the most when I talk about this team, because it is kind of the biggest question mark of Valtko's tenure, really. This midfield is very reminiscent of Jill Ellis's midfield. Jill Ellis's midfield worked very well because, well, I won't say very well, caveat, it worked well. I don't know if her tactics were great, but the individual players made it work. So you had Julie Ertz, playing that sixth destroyer position. And to her left, you had Sam Mewis, who was just an absolute outrageous human being. 6 foot tall, ability to control the ball with both feet, make passes, win aerial duels, tackle everything. Like, she's kind of like, if you were to build an unstoppable number 8, it would look like Sam Mewis.
Yeah.
And that's what we had.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore. And to me, that's been the biggest problem, trying to figure out who's going to play that role. Lindsay Oran has stepped into that role, despite wearing the number 10 shirt.
Yep.
And It's tough because I think she's lost a bit of mobility. She's had a lot of nagging knee injuries, and that knee still. I mean,
It's
she
taped
had
up.
she's got the nickname at her club Lyon. They call her Potato because of the way her knee swelled. That's not good. That
No,
doesn't inspire me with confidence.
not
But
really.
it's very much like who's gonna be that number 8. Like Julie Ertz being back, it'll make the midfield look more familiar to people, but I don't know if it fixes the problems we've seen.
Who would you like to see ideally in the number 8? Or I guess to kind of make it a little bit of a wider question, who would you be slotting into the midfield in terms of chemistry and links between the players that have been included?
So the sad part is Sam Ewis.
Right.
I would love to have Sam Ewis healthy, but she has not been for a little while, and it's really makes me very sad.
Yeah. Popular
Um,
answer.
yeah, so it's very difficult because the way that like the U.S. midfield right now is very unbalanced. We have a lot of number 10s and we have a few number 6s. We only brought really 2 number 6s and Andy Sullivan and Julie Ertz. We left Sam Coffey, who's a different profile of number 6,
Yeah.
at home. And so she's going to have to work her way into the fold in the next cycle. This is also Jalen Howe. I don't want to forget her. She's very much in that destroyer mode. I was looking at her stats for the NWSL this season, and she's just like a terror in midfield. It's been fun to watch. But so you have 6s, you have 10s. There's really nobody who plays that 8 box to box very well. So to me, it feels like we need a formation change. And kind of on the fly, if you remember those games, the games versus Germany, late in the season or late in the year last year.
Yeah.
One of the things Valtko did was keep Lindsay Horan deeper to connect better with Andy Sullivan and kind of rely on, the 10 to run around and kind of link play. It wasn't the best solution, but it helped defensively. And that's when they were able to turn things around. So personally, for me, without having Sam Ewis, I do think you need to look at a formation change, figure out how you're going, whose job is it going to be to get kind of connect the midfield to the attack, to kind of be that midfield kind of player who is very energetic.
Yeah.
And I think that would also help Lindsay Horan's role as well, and probably help Julie Ertz, who has missed a lot of time, is back, does look pretty good, but missed a lot of time. And Andy Sullivan, who actually is a very good distributor of the ball. So I think if you give her time and space, she can, add another dimension with her passing.
Yeah.
Will we see that?
The $1 million question.
Yeah, exactly. When they're put under pressure and they have to react, maybe they go to that. But
yeah,
I don't know if that's something they've been working on, saying this is our new identity. That's very hard for this team in this federation.
Yeah. A number 10 that I feel like I should bring up is Rose Lavelle. Is there any concerns around her? Obviously, she's a name you definitely expect on the roster. You brought up the Ellis era of midfield, and Rose Lavelle has to kind of be like the standout name in there, or one of. She's been out. There's kind of like minor injuries, but it's like non-minor injury, but it's like still kind of like a big question mark. There's, like you mentioned, a mountain of number 10s that can slot in there, or shallow formation change come in. You can certainly work around with the player profiles to put that one in. But is there any concerns with Rose Lavelle possibly not being tip-top form, or, the Rose Lavelle kind of like not making everybody around? And how much of an how much
my
of
favorite Roosevelt.
You can sit down and watch her highlights any day.
Yeah.
But I don't know, are we going to see much of those highlights, or how big of a concern is that?
I'm fairly concerned. I don't have any inside information in the status of her injury, the extent of it, but I'm concerned. I actually got more concerned when I saw DeMello bring it. She is uncapped. She has not stepped foot on the pitch for the U.S. on the senior team side. So this is a little concerning, I would say. Hopefully Rose is okay. She used to be on the Spirit. That's a team I cover locally. And she has these spells of injury. She had been doing quite well getting through them. And it seems like I believe it was the Ireland friendlies that the U.S. played, she picked up an injury there. And that was a bad set of friendlies. Also, lost Mallory Swanson in that one.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to remember that.
Yeah, that was bad. And at some point, I guess we do need to talk about the players that are missing because of injury, because I think that's a big thing as well. But as far as Rose goes, I mean, We'll see. I do think that she's been out for a while. If it's just a matter of rest and figure out, like, get it to heal and then manage the pain, she can play through. She knows how to play through injury. She's done it for a while. Is that the best
Yeah.
thing for her? Probably not. But this is a World Cup, and she probably will,
Yeah.
if asked. So, but I'm hoping that players like Ashley Sanchez, Savannah DeMello, perhaps can step into that role and give her a little bit of a break, so that she doesn't have to play as much. But missing Rose in like a fully healthy capacity
Yeah.
it's a big question mark, and that does make me worry.
I'm glad you brought up injuries because you've also got, you just mentioned Alexa Swanson, Macario, the biggest one. I feel like we did have a fair amount of hopes seeing her slot back in, but maybe it was a little too soon, and just like mentally she spoke about it, probably just not the right time. Every team going into the World Cup really is dealing with some pretty big injuries. There's maybe a select few you can count on like one hand that are going in with a relatively fit squad. But, maybe can you touch on the fact of, is this something that the US has known to deal with quite well? Or, I mean, I can't remember like on top of my head a big tournament where they went in fully, hit with some pretty big injuries, and the players were absolutely on form. They were one of the young ones. Again, they're one of those players, or some of these players that you think are involved in that generational shift. They're not going to be here in a pretty massive tournament. How's the feel knowing that those players are going to be out?
Yeah, it's honestly, it sucks. It sucks a lot. I've been looking forward to Macario ever since her
Mm-hmm.
days at Stanford. I mean, she's just been outrageous. She's been one of my favorite players already. She's only 23. So, like,
It's crazy.
yeah, it's wild. She already won a Champions League. She led Lyon in goals the year they won the Champions League as well. Like, she is an outrageous player. And so I am really sad that we're not going to be able to see her, because the dream was, when we were, looking hopefully after a very abysmal Olympics in which Macario played 7 overall minutes,
Yep.
a very abysmal Olympic performance. It was like, okay, but in the World Cup, we're going to be better. We're going to have Macario, we're going to have Sophia Smith, we're going to have Mallory Swanson, and 2 of those are gone.
Yeah.
So that part hurts. Also missing, of course, is Becky Sauerbrunn.
Yeah.
That was rough. And I think that's where I also have some question marks in terms of the defense, because she's such a leader and she's so important. I mean, she's team's captain, have been for a while, and her not making it is another, like, that hurts. That causes
It's
problems.
still stabbing the wounds. Like it's what, when we saw those news, it's I didn't even want to bring it up because I feel like I've been trying to just put it in so I don't have
blame
to
you.
think.
That's one way I should have done that. I shouldn't have brought it up at all, because now we're thinking about it and it's very sad.
But one thing, it's funny you brought her up because she knows how to podium. You think of a player that knows how to have those fine silver linings of making sure to push it to the edge. It's her. When you want to podium, those are the qualities that you want. The U.S. Women's National Team has never missed a podium. Certainly not in the past few years, especially at a World Cup. If somebody knows how to win, it's them. With those flaws that we just mentioned and some of the injuries, I guess, how much do you trust Valtko for this job, which is, it's a massive job.
Yes.
Making sure not only, I think the expectation is to win again, but maybe lowering that expectation a little bit, at least a podium. What are certain things that you think are a must tweak for him to be able to make sure he can get the team out there?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. First of all, there, with full recognition that the expectation to win a World Cup is wild.
Yeah.
That's just wild pressure, and it would be their 3rd straight. That's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand, but the sad part is we have the talent to do it, and that's what really is kind of frustrating. I think this cycle, the transition of the team, hasn't been handled all that well. Like we said, there are still midfield questions. Honestly, still defensive questions. He brought 2 center backs because Becky Sauerbrunn was missing, and that's not enough.
Yeah.
Julie Ertz can drop back and play center back. Andy Sullivan has done it for the Spirit, but those are, I mean, Julie Ertz hasn't played center back since I think it was like 2017, maybe. So it was a while ago.
And there's
So I
already
think
other like midfield concerns that you mentioned, that it's like you can't take away those figures and slot them into the back.
right, exactly, and it's tough. So for me, the 2 question marks are: what is he going to do with the defense? How is he going to get that organized and up to its most stable and obstinate type of defense, so you can have that base to kind of build on. Naomi Gurma is excellent. Alana Cook has been good, but has also had times where she has struggled. So you just have to figure out that pairing and how to make sure they're on the same page. It seems like those are going to be the two they rely on from day one. Midfield, got to figure out fluidity, got to get through the midfield, got to figure out how to stop the gaps and have people running at a defense, especially if you have defensive question marks. Caveat all of that.
Yeah.
They could still do very well because the attack, despite who's missing, is ridiculous.
It's unreal.
Yeah, it's the star, the highlight of this team is going to be who they have in attack and the potential for them to combine and do a lot of work, both defensively on the defensive side of the ball, but also so much outrageous talent 1v1 or combining. And so if he finds a way to get those players clicking in attack, they won't need much of the ball to cause problems.
You're right. Can I get maybe a prediction on a breakout player? And I have a feeling it could be one of the attacking players.
Yeah, I mean, yes, correct. I mean, I can't say breakout because she's pretty much
she's broken out.
Yeah, most people know her, but I think on a global stage they don't. She wasn't called into the Olympics, so this is going to be your first real major tournament, and it's Sophia Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, she's outrageous. I'm kind of very interested to see how other teams kind of approach defending her and kind of decide maybe if it's like, who knows, maybe we can get away with it. Maybe she just does that because the NWSL is super transitional, and I would warn you not to do that. She can play pretty much any style. I also want to keep an eye on Ashley Sanchez.
Yeah,
she's a very, very clever player. She's fun and she does a lot of interesting things. And even though the most recent Spirit game where they lost to the Thorns 4-2, she was responsible for the 2 Spirit goals, and that was probably her best game all season. And so she's getting comfortable. She's understanding like the space, how to slow things down, when to speed things up. And that's kind of really what you need for a number 10. So if she starts combining with that attack, things can get fun, especially if Roosevelt can't go full time.
Yeah, and I think she has sharpened her tools rather than adding more tools. And one of them is definitely that intelligence. You can really see her growing in that aspect of her game. But talking about the opposition that's going to have to defend against those set of attackers there, it's a relatively okay group. I feel like kind of the biggest ones are a nation that the US is quite familiar with, the Netherlands. We're going to get a rematch from the get-go. How do you assess that group in terms of the opposition and just the challenges that they're going to offer?
Yeah, so thank you to that number 1 FIFA ranking. This helped a bit. So Vietnam, Netherlands, and Portugal in order. Vietnam's an interesting one because we just saw them play Germany, and they played them quite well. It was 1-0 for a while, but they had plenty of opportunities to equalize. And the game, even then, still it ended 2-1. So they're going to be a team that's going to require the US to be sharp, no matter who's in the starting 11. You're right. The Netherlands is the game. So that's the game. You win that one. You're looking at Portugal. You should be able to win that one as well. Should be able to win the Vietnam match. The biggest one is, what are you going to do against Netherlands? If they get out of the group in the first spot, they might be okay. If they're in the second spot and they go to the round of 16, they're going to have a pretty difficult opponent looking at the bracket. And if that happens, who knows, right? This is not, it can go very badly. So it's tough to predict. I do think they'll get out of the group, but I have no idea if they're going to be first or second. I kind of lean first because Netherlands is there, but
yeah, I think also the Netherlands are kind of going with a new head coach that they still haven't had a major competition under. I'm sure you're quite familiar with Parsons, but that was really not kind of the Euros that they wanted to have with him. So for them, there's still a lot of question marks. It's kind of like the US actually has a leg up in this one because they've been working with Valtko a little bit longer. Say the finish first, and they kind of have an easier, I think, again, looking at the bracket at round of 16. The final question would be, what would your prediction be for how well the US is going to do in terms of their run, and just expectations of how you think ideally it's going to look like for them?
Ooh, that is such a tough one. So many unknowns, I think, is the problem. I have a lot of things that I want to see. Do I think I'm going to see them? Probably not. But, I do. It's still a great collection of players. So I do want to say that, like, up front. Some of this stuff is difficult because the US is caught in a transition where having the best collection of players doesn't matter as much as it used to. So you're going to have to figure out tactically how to take advantage of weaknesses, how to create weaknesses, and all of that. And I don't think they've been good at that level of problem solving. And that's what scares me in the knockout round. So I could see the attack, like Sophia Smith, going off and then getting to semifinal and final. I could see that very easily, just because I don't think across the front line any team, any country has what they have. And even again, still missing some players that are very, very key. So that part of it is like the saving grace, but there's also the part that they've had some of those players when they played England, when they played Germany, when they played Spain, and it still didn't go very well. So there's still a lot to figure out. I'm filibustering because I don't know. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
They could go out, pretty early in the knockout rounds, or they could end up in the final. It really, really depends. And I have no idea.
Well, that's kind of the story of this World Cup. It's like you've got at least, on top of my head, like 5 possible winners, which I feel like one just is an idea of like how good the competition has become in the game. But also just what a good World Cup it's going to be, because a lot of these games, I feel like we're going to tune in really not knowing who can pull it off. And it could be like the most chaotic, like Saudi Arabia, Argentina back in the World Cup. Like it could be one of those.
Yes.
So I think any prediction is a hard one to put on here. But Andre, we're slightly running out of time here. You cover plenty of the stuff, and I know you're going to be covering even more of it in the World Cup. How can the people catch up with a lot of your writing, your podcasting, everything around the World Cup, the NWSL, and the U.S. Women's National Team?
I would just say follow Diaspora United podcast. We have Diaspora United on Diaspora United Pod, UTDPOD on Twitter. You can also follow me on Twitter, 838_Carlisle, CARLISLE. It's a tricky one. But I think those are the best ways, because there are going to be a few outlets that are kind of bounce around in terms of content. But I think if you follow both of those, you'll see at least a tweet or a retweet. So
you'll be up to date. I will certainly leave Andre's Twitter and all the handles that he just mentioned in the description if you're on YouTube. If not, definitely just put in what Andre just mentioned. I really appreciate you joining me today, talking about the reigning champions, none other than the big guys. And I'll be tuning in, most certainly, seeing those midfield questions look to be answered, as well as the back line and maybe the front line just go off like you mentioned.
It would be my dream. But yes, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for letting me waffle and get out of the prediction question.
Absolutely. Well, that was all things United States with Andre in Group E. And this is a very fun group because we're joined by the finalists from the last World Cup, with 2 nations that are debuting into the World Cup. Kicking things off with the Dutch, the Netherlands were obviously the finalists with the US last World Cup, and they have definitely been on a journey since then. The departure of Sarina Wiegman following the Olympics has definitely put the Netherlands in a lot of challenges and presented a fair amount of obstacles for them. She was replaced by Englishman Mark Parsons, who had never worked on an international stage before. Most of his work has been in the NWSL, working with top clubs over there, but never really on an international stage. This was definitely an interesting choice, and a choice that we all know by now did not work at all. I even had an entire video comparing why Sarina Wiegman absolutely thrived with the Lionesses and Mark Parsons had the amount of obstacles that he did, even though both of them had the same amount of time to work with their squads. However, one achieved gold, as we know, the other one definitely was a disappointment, which kind of led to his firing or sacking, or however you want to name it, after the Euros. But speaking of that Euros, it was really, really disappointing because the Netherlands, very much known for that fast attacking pressure play, none of that was present. There was a major disconnect between the midfield and the back line, as well as the front line. You had players being deployed out of possession. Janssen in a left back position, she's definitely not a fullback. You had Jill Roord, in my opinion, one of the best 10s in the game, operating as a winger. Daniela van de Donk was coming back from a knee injury. Jackie Groningen, Spitze in the midfield. Nobody really had a great tournament except their youngster goalkeeper, who secured a move to Aston Villa this summer. But regardless, Mark Parsons was not able to get the best out of the players. And you look at that squad, it is full of such big names. And now who's taking care of them is Andreas Jonker, a pretty experienced name specifically in Dutch football. He was the assistant or former assistant coach to Louis van Gaal. one-time caretaker at Bayern Munich and a head coach at Wolfsburg. And so he's definitely not fazed by pressure. He's not fazed by managing big teams because he's managed pretty big teams, the two biggest teams in German football. He came in September, secured the qualification spot. And if you remember how they secured that qualification spot, it was a 93rd minute goal by Esme Burks. Just absolutely crazy scenes. And it's a player that we're going to get to talk about very, very soon. Really quickly on what he's done so far with the squad is he has clearly integrated a lot more cohesion than what we were seeing under Mark Parsons. The players trust each other and trust themselves, something that was clearly absent in the Euros. He has involved pressing once again. It had been missing since Parsons had taken over. That kind of does come a lot from his German management career, as well as working under Louis van Gaal. They love to press. He's been able to do that in the squad. Very tactically flexible, certainly interesting choices on sometimes. He has played Palova on the wing, even in the midfield, even as a fullback a few times. They have worked out, but I'm not sure if that was more of like a testing out thing or just something that he will be doing in the World Cup. Regardless, he plays Jules Roord in the 10 and he plays Janssen as a center back. So two major issues that we were dealing in the Euros are fixed with him so far. Now, we obviously have to bring up the loss of Viviana Miedema, and I think the loss of Viviana Miedema is kind of the equivalent of Janine Beckie for Canada. Every nation is going in with a pretty major injury, like André and I discussed about the US Women's National Team, but for me, the Netherlands and Canada are the two most hurting ones with these injuries. Beth Mead and Leah Williamson, for example, haven't been the face of that squad in every single tournament in the last 4 or 5 years. They're absolutely vital now. At the Euros, they were very, very vital. But looking back maybe at the Olympics, Beth Mead wasn't even there. Leah Williamson certainly didn't have the Leah Williamson aura that she has now. However, Viviana Miedema for the Netherlands has been such an important role for when they won the Euros in 2017, for when they reached the final 2019. Viviana Miedema, though she's young and she's a very close in age with the rest of the players that I'm mentioning, has been a key role to the Netherlands program. And I'm most interested in seeing how they're going to be able to flex that around. Yes, she usually is deployed as a number 9 in the national system, but has clearly been seen to favor that number 10 role. This is where I think Jill Roord is going to have to shine out. Her Daniela van de Donk depends on how they get deployed. She also is very experienced. Lika Martens, another name, very, very experienced. And I think with Viviana Miedema being out, this is where some of these players that are just as experienced need to take on that leadership role. Kalma, only 23 years of age, I think she's the one that's going to be slotting into Miedema's role. An absolute terror in front of goal, does not shy away from taking a shot. And these are only the bunch of players that I'm mentioning on top of my head, but they have a really good balance with experienced players, but young players who are very, very good. And you have to talk about Fenna Kalma and Esme Burks, for example, even Palova. Really, really good, bright season for Arsenal. It kind of was thrown into the fire because of all the injuries that were taking place. I do have high hopes in terms of they will rebound from the Euros. I think they will comfortably finish in that second spot behind the United States. I haven't even started talking about the two other nations, and I'm already making a prediction. But for the Netherlands, I think from what I've seen, the cohesiveness is back. He's had a fair amount of time to work with the squad, given the names that are not included on the roster, given the names of Miedema not being involved. I think there is enough depth with those youngsters to be able to replace these spots. Now joining them is Portugal, who have had a very, very, very long road to qualify for the World Cup. A total of 13 matches to be able to get themselves in this position. So it's like they've already done a massive run into the World Cup when the World Cup hasn't even started. 10 of those matches were from the European qualification phases, but they had to go through 2 more phases of playoffs. So definitely a very, very hard fought achievement, not confirmed until February. So they have been working very hard for this spot, and so they certainly got it. During this run, they went 8 games unbeaten in their last FIFA international window. They had also a sequence that included a 5-0 victory over Haiti and New Zealand. Very impressive runs, and this has actually taken them to the 21st FIFA ranking, their highest ever ranking. So Portugal are definitely on a very good, increased, positive trajectory. Their head coach has been working them since 2014, almost a decade. It's been 9 years. Working with a nation that long definitely has its pros and cons, but a massive pro that I have seen is he knows how to integrate those players coming out of the youth system, because he has seen so many of them, and he has been integrated of seeing a lot of the players that are involved in the U20 stages and the U17s. He's a manager that loves to rotate and loves to give every single player their opportunity, and that is what we saw in the Euros, and I expect to see the same thing around, where we're not really going to have your starting 11 be exactly the same throughout the 3 group stage games. They're going to rotate, and that actually presents different threats for the nations where they don't know what they're exactly expecting, something that they imposed during the Euros. Jessica Silva, for me, one of the most exciting European players out there right now. So pacey, so good, and just like reminds me of Marta almost. She's absolutely ruthless, like she's brutal. You do not want to see Jessica Silva on the wing, and you certainly don't want to see her on the counterattack because she will punish you. She's already hit that 100 mark cap for her nation. Experienced, good, on tip-top form. If she's able to convert that, I think she's going to cause a lot of trouble for every kind of defending line in that group. Kika Nazareth, another exciting youngster that I feel like will have a really good tournament. She's only 20, broke into the Benfica senior squad at 16. She was the youngest ever capped Portuguese player. She's already won 6 trophies with Lisbon. Like, she is really, really good and really going under the radar for some time. Very versatile number 10, able to keep possession, able to have a really good vision for pockets and passes. Like, she is a number 10, very similar to the likes of Fran Kirby even, I feel like. This season, she had 24 goals, 15 assists, and 32 matches. Like, that is 39 goal involvement in 32 matches. And that's exactly what I expect her to do this World Cup. Any kind of goal that Portugal will be able to achieve, Nazareth is going to be included. Like, I just know it. I'm calling it. Their first World Cup appearance, I think they will be looking for a win. That's the first thing you want to tick off the box. And they're not coming in to just play and kick a ball around. They will be in aiming for a shocker and chaos, and I think Portugal will deliver just that. The last and final team in the group is another debuting nation, the Vietnam. They had a really good run in the Asian Cup, and they followed it up by winning the Southeast Asian Games as well competition. They recorded a 4th finish in the AFF Women's Championship last year. They're going into this World Cup riding on a lot of continental momentum right now. Their head coach has a very long history with the team. He had his first spell back in 1997. He's had several spells in charge, but within that, he has definitely seen every single player that has come in and out the system for the past 25, 26, 7 years. Interestingly, he plays a lot of 3 or 4 in the back, which I feel like won't be something we will see. I think when you go up against the US or the Netherlands in your team with the qualities of Vietnam, you probably will not be throwing 3 in the back, definitely playing more of a lower block of maybe even 5 in the back. We just recently saw them against Germany, and I think they had a pretty good defensive game. Even though they lost it, they in some ways didn't really look too nervous or too scared. They came out with a back 4 against Germany, pretty expected, but it was a very confident performance, and I love the confidence of a team that's going up against Germany and debuting their first ever World Cup. Hyun Nu, a very established and experienced Vietnamese player. She's 31 now, but has been involved in the system since she was a youngster. Like, she's skillful, sharp, intelligent forward, so clinical with her finishing, which is no surprise that she's Vietnam's record goal scorer. This confidence attitude that I was talking about, she absolutely embodies that. She is, go big or go home kind of attitude, and she loves to rub that on her teammates. Titan Ha is another player that caught a lot of eyes, certainly my pair of eyes in the Asian Cup. Really good dribbling ability, which helped Vietnam relieve pressure in a lot of dangerous attacking areas. She can play anywhere in the front line, which is another good flexible thing when you've got a player who's versatile and good on dribbling and good on relieving pressure when you're being defended against. They're not a team to be underestimated, and I really feel like they can cause a few troubles for the Netherlands, specifically looking at how they played against Germany. I feel like there's going to be a few obstacles presented for the 3 other nations. So both Vietnam and Portugal, even though they're debuting into this, they absolutely should not be underestimated because they got here through a very, very, very long road. Like, I just spoke about Portugal taking 13 matches to get here. Vietnam, this was absolutely not an easy road. They have had to come through so many obstacles to get to this point. For me, I do think the United States is going to finish first. The runner-ups are going to be the Netherlands. Regardless if that is switched around, I wouldn't be surprised because both teams are coming in with some injuries, flaws. Both of them are going in with new coaches, as in this is the first time with them in a World Cup. So both the Netherlands and the US for me are kind of like in a parallel stream in some ways, which is interesting because they were the finalists in 2019. Now very, very different eras in both squads. So for me, this is going to be a very, very fun rematch between the two, obviously. I want to hear your opinions and thoughts on this group, on the teams, on André, which I'll be leaving all his links down below, so definitely check it out. But as always, leave me some feedback, your thoughts on the series. 3 more episodes to go. How are you enjoying them? I'd love to hear it. But as always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.